Welcome to another Cho Photo tutorial on how to use Adobe Photoshop CS4 and Adobe Camera Raw CS4. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to soften someone's skin in a portrait using reverse clarity. I've selected a portrait of my good friend Jen here, who's a very beautiful lady, and I'm going to go ahead and get that open in Adobe Camera Raw. I've already gone through and made all of my corrections for exposure, color temperature, and etc. And I've also already used my spot removal tool to retouch anything that I'd be worried about in her portrait. And there's really not that much there. As you can see, there's only a few little clones. You want to make sure you have Adobe Camera Raw set to open the image as a smart object in Photoshop. So you can click on your settings menu down here in the center, and you want to make sure the Open in Photoshop as Smart Object box is selected. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Open Image, or sorry, Open Object now is what that has changed to open the object in Photoshop. Opening something as a smart object will cause Photoshop to open it as an editable Camera Raw file. It basically saves the Camera Raw file as a layer in Photoshop so that you can go back and edit that layer in Camera Raw at any time that you want. And so I've got that layer right here, and I've zoomed into 100%, and I'm just going to go ahead and rename that layer Base. And you have to double click it to get it to rename it, and if you don't click it just right, it will open up that window you saw me get there. So now that I've got my base layer, I'm going to go ahead and right click it and do New Smart Object via Copy. It's very important you duplicate your smart objects in that exact way. Otherwise, there are other ways to copy that layer, but if you copy it in any other way, it'll actually keep the two smart objects linked together, and when you edit one, you actually change the settings in both of them, which defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do here. So now that I have the copy of that layer, I'm going to go ahead and rename it Skin Soft, because it's going to be my softening layer for the skin. So now if I go ahead and double click that softening layer, it will open that in Camera Raw for me, and I'm going to drag my clarity down to -100. As you can see, this softens the portrait substantially. I'll go ahead and zoom into 100% there. So there it is at -100, and here it is at 0. So it just softens a whole lot of stuff out, evens out tones. Basically, you lose a whole bunch of detail, which is what we're going for in doing reverse clarity on that layer. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK and open it. And as you can see, it's preparing the adjustments to that smart object. The next thing I want to do is I want to put a layer mask on that layer by clicking the New Layer Mask button. And here's where the editing actually begins. I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush tool, and I'm going to make sure I'm using a big, soft, fluffy brush, and I'm going to set my opacity for the brush tool down to about 25 or 30%, so I have a very nice, soft, fluffy, low opacity brush. I'm going to use my bracket keys to increase the size of that brush so it pretty much covers her whole eye and eyebrow, and I'm going to do one quick pass with black so that I'm painting some of that sharpness back in on that eye, and I'm going to go ahead and do it over here as well. So as you can see, just at 30%, there's already a fair amount of sharpness jumping through there. And I'm going to go down and do a 30% pass over the greater area of her lips as well, because we want to make sure her lips and her eyes are just nice and sharp. But being at 30% opacity isn't going to do too much. So I'm still going to leave it at 30, and I'm going to decrease the size of my brush some more. And I'm going to do another pass over her eyebrow there, bringing it back in just a little bit more. And I'll do her second eyebrow. And we'll do the eye itself, and the eye, basically the eyeball and the eyelashes. There we go. And of course, just the lips and teeth, trying to avoid the area around it generally. If you ever do a little bit too much, you can just reverse your color palette and paint on the outside of whatever you're doing. And then I'm going to knock it down again one more time and paint in a little bit more on the eye. Pass very narrowly on the eyebrow, just trying to get the eyebrows themselves. And the eye again over here. And then lastly the lips again. And at this point, I'm actually going to go ahead and turn off my base layer so I can see how much is left of that softened layer. So as you can see down here, there's a little bit more of that soft layer left, so I want to make sure I just knock that out. So it's because I do want the softness on the skin and the lips a little bit to come through, but probably not on the teeth. And then I'll come up here and same thing on the eye, probably just one more pass or two more passes there to really make sure that the maximum sharpness is coming through on those. Alright. It's also not uncommon to knock that brush up a little bit and do just maybe one pass over the nose area and on the crease and dimples here, just to make sure that it doesn't look too soft in areas that we wouldn't expect it to be soft. Next, I still have, the hair and the shirt and the background that I may or may not want to soften. So what I'm going to do is I am going to choose a brush now with a very high opacity, say 75, and I'm going to increase the size on it, and I'm going to paint all that back in real fast. I do want to release occasionally during this, just so that if I slip, I don't have to start over from scratch. And if I do too much, I can just paint it in from the other side. And what you can even do here to see what you're getting is turn off that base layer, so you can see that you're basically hiding all that softened hair and background and all that. And I am kind of slopping it here for those of you who are wondering. I'll be a hair more careful when I'm doing this for someone to order prints, but not by much, because you really do want to have those soft edges in there on, no hard lines. So there we go. Just kind of getting the last few little edges there. Now turn my base back on. So normally I would also soften my background, but I do that with a separate layer. So I have my skin softening as one layer, and I'd be blurring out my background with another. So if I zoom back into 100% here, it's not really obvious something has been done until I turn off that skin softening layer. And we're just going for a real subtle effect here, which I feel like I've definitely achieved. If you feel like you need to adjust any areas, remember you can paint with white or black to adjust that masking layer. Also, if you feel that you've softened it too much, just on the skin softening layer, you can turn that opacity down to say like 70 or 80, or just kind of adjust it so a little bit more detail shows through that softened area. Also, you may find that after you have softened the skin, you'll actually go back into your base layer in Camera Raw. You may even add in a little bit of clarity, or even turn up your sharpening a little bit more. But it is important to remember that you don't want to just generally sharpen your master. The most important thing you do is sharpen for output when you actually resize to print. So anyhow, that's how you soften someone's skin in a portrait and using reverse clarity from Adobe Camera Raw. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me through my website, which is www.chophoto.com. That's CHOPHOTO.com.